What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Hutch Coming in Clutch. I'm your host, Hutchison Brown, and today we've got a fantastic show. I am starting to look at underdog drafts. I just texted my homie this morning and was like, yo, what's up, guys? Hope y'all are doing well. Let's get a head count for this league this year. It felt like today, when that Shannon Sharp meme where he's drinking the Mountain Dew and he's just like,
lose it, you never win. You've never had
Oh, boy!
that stuff is
Yeah!
like that's how I'm feeling right now. I'm so excited because we're finally entering that summer season where it's like redraft season's approaching. Best ball season is here. Underdog drafts are gonna start. So over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be talking about underdog overpays, underpays, and sleepers for my next 3 episodes. It's going to be quite a fun little series today. We're starting with overpays, some overrated ADPs right now. So without further ado, before we get into the show today, please follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at HutchisonB_FF. Make sure you follow the podcast wherever you're listening or watching on YouTube so you'll be notified every single time a new episode does drop. And also check out the podcast on Instagram and TikTok, the little clips and highlights. We're going to start, though, with some listener Q&A before we get into the actual overpays of the show today. We're going to start with @the_Trig on X. Or no, sorry, it's not X, it's Twitter. I don't care what people say. Aaron Jones or Jordan Mason? Very simple question. Could be a 50-50 split, could be 60-40. I think Mason in non-PPR formats will be better, but in PPR, Aaron Jones will be better. That's the question here. So I really only want to focus on this Vikings backfield, how we feel about it for this year. I want to start with the Aaron Jones side. Personally, when you look at this backfield, when you look at Aaron Jones did last year, when you look at the talent difference between the two players, Aaron Jones, I think, will be the lead of this backfield. As long as he doesn't hit that age cliff, which he showed no signs of last year, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be the lead back. I expect a 60 to 65% backfield share for Aaron Jones, for him to be that lead guy, along with a ton of receiving work, especially on third downs. Jordan Mason's going to be a great complement. He's going to be that early down grinder. He's going to be a guy that gets Aaron Jones some rest, keeps Aaron Jones' legs fresh. Going to be a very, very helpful addition to this offense, gives them backfield some depth. So overall, looking at that situation as itself, Aaron Jones is going to be a good fantasy back, while Jordan Mason is mostly a handcuff. However, I do think Aaron Jones is going to be good this year. If there's ever a time where Aaron Jones misses games, which is very possible, Jordan Mason will have the Vikings backfield to himself. And this Vikings offense, I project to be very, very good. Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, some great receiving threats. You have a great offensive line, and you have a quarterback who JJ McCarthy, who's working with a head coach in Kevin O'Connell, and I truly believe that that's going to work. JJ McCarthy, it's been very clear. Last year and this year, he's been putting in the work to learn this Vikings offense, learn this Viking system, and become the best quarterback he can be. And I'm rooting for him. I'm rooting for him hard, and I believe in him. I believe that he's going to be good. I believe he's going to make this work, and I believe he could be even better than Sam Darnold was for this team last year. As a result, if you have a guy that's getting like 80+% of the opportunities in this backfield, like Jordan Mason would, if Aaron Jones were to miss, you're talking about like a top 10, top 5 back. So Jordan Mason's an elite handcuff right now, and I think Aaron Jones will be a good starting back for fantasy football, but Jordan Mason also at his ADP is a great handcuff. So I like both in drafts, and I wouldn't mind leaving my draft with both. I don't like doing that with a backfield, but with these two, they're both great values, so I'm intrigued. Now, the next question we got to get into is from @JacobO_Mose. Would you rather have in Dynasty Tyron Tracy or Jordan Mason, the aforementioned running back for the Minnesota Vikings? This one's pretty simple to me because one of these running backs, it's their job to lose. But the other running back is the backup. And I talked about it earlier with Jordan Mason. He's the backup to Aaron Jones. Now, if Aaron Jones were to go down, like if let's say today Aaron Jones had an ACL tear, he's out for the season, I'd prefer Jordan Mason in this scenario because you have the starting backup in elite offense for a year, and that's a great rental piece. I'd take that over a day 3 running back in Tyron Tracy. However, right now as it stands, Aaron Jones is healthy. So I'm going to take Tyron Tracy because obviously Cam Skadaboo's a fun back. He's an exciting player, and I think he will do everything he can for New York. But he's a day 3 player. Tyron Tracy was too, but he proved a lot last year. I think heading into this season, given that Tyron Tracy proved a lot last year and Cam Skadaboo's proven nothing, it's Tyron Tracy's job to lose. And the next question, same person, is Caleb Williams a top 10 dynasty quarterback? Let's list them out. Let's just list them out right now, man. I wrote down some of the dynasty quarterbacks I'd consider in the Caleb Williams tier. So here's some players that I'm definitely taking over Caleb Williams, right? In no order. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Jaden Daniels, and Joe Burrow. A lot of J's in there. Those 5 quarterbacks, you're taking over Caleb Williams, and I'm not looking back. Now we get into some more controversial names. Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Bo Nix, CJ Stroud, Drake May, Kyler Murray, Jordan Love. Where's Caleb Williams fit among this list? Because he's definitely in this tier for me. If you have him outside of this tier, I think you're doing it wrong. But he has to be in this tier somewhere. For me personally, I think he is definitely a top 10 quarterback, and I'm putting him at 6. I'm putting him up there right after Joe Burrow. I think those first 5 are in a tier of their own, and then you move down to Caleb Williams in the next tier at number 6. I think he deserves to be here because he was the number 1 overall pick. He's an exciting, explosive playmaker. And last year, while it came with some struggles, it came with some reckless play, it came with some mistakes, you saw so many flashes of this kid could truly be elite. This kid could make throws that not many other quarterbacks in this league can make. This kid could be a dynasty QB1. This kid could be a monster for the Chicago Bears. You saw those flashes. And in year one, considering the fact that you have a mix of head coaches, you have a team that's not great overall, that gives me enough confidence to say he will have a breakout in year two, especially considering the upgrades that the Bears have made for their offense. You add 2 new weapons. You have a third weapon, Roma Dunze, who's looking to make a big breakout. And then you have DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, 2 very good options at receiver for this team. A completely rebuilt offensive line, multiple huge additions. Then you have Caleb Williams himself jumping into year 2. And then you have Ben Johnson working with him on that. That's going to be quite exciting. I'm so excited to see what Caleb Williams does this year, and I'm ranking him highly in Dynasty. I think you should buy him right now, like people, because it obviously depends on the manager you have who has Caleb Williams. Some people are just done with him. Some people are already done. I think I'm just getting started. I'm in for this year. Now, let's look into my underdog overpays. Let's talk about some players I think are being overdrafted right now in underdog drafts. We're gonna start with a quarterback. I hate to say this one because it hurts my heart. I love watching this guy over the last 2 years. He's been a fun player, but it's hard to say that Baker Mayfield will repeat what he did last year. And he's being drafted pretty much like he's going to. He's going as the quarterback 7 right now in drafts. Sometimes I see him go even higher, and I just think that's too high. He finished as the quarterback 5 last year in most scoring formats, and looking at what he did, he had a touchdown rate and amount of touchdowns that was just too high. Let's look at his career for a second, starting from 2018. His career touchdown percentages: 5.6, 4.1, 5.3, 4.1, 3.0, 4.9, an average of 4.5%. That's about league average, maybe slightly above it, right? That's about league average. And he's never had a season more than 28 touchdowns, which was in 2023. But now let's look at 2024. A 7.2% touchdown rate, far beyond league average, and 41 touchdowns, 13 more than he ever did in any season in his career. That is insane. I understand the defense is still not looking great. I understand they added a weapon with Emeka Ibuka. But naturally, when you look at quarterbacks who've thrown for touchdowns like that, when you look at that massive of a jump in a random season like Baker Mayfield just had, this isn't as like a second year breakout. This isn't a year 3 step forward. This is he's a veteran. We've seen Baker Mayfield for a while. This is just a crazy fluke season. When you see that kind of year, you tend to see a massive dip and it goes right back to the mean. So I expected like a 5% touchdown rate, a 4.5% touchdown rate next season, and that's going to put him in that 25 to 30 touchdown range. And as a result, that's going to put him, I did the math, last year that would have put him at QB 9 to 11. Like, that's just not the place you want to draft the QB 7. And the thing is, you say QB 7, you're like, oh, that's only 2 spots off. But the problem is where exactly he's going among other running backs and receivers and tight ends. He's going there's that first tier where it's like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Jalen Hurts, Jane Daniels, right? You got that tier. And then a round or 2 below, that's where Baker Mayfield's going. He's going right there. And there's so many great running backs and receivers and tight ends available that it's hard to click the button on a quarterback who I just don't believe is going to be in that elite tier. If you want an elite quarterback, get one of those elite 5 above. Don't settle for Baker Mayfield in that same-ish price range. I just don't think that's worth it. Now, let's look at Joe Mixon. Finished as a top 12 running back last year, going as RB 16 right now in drafts. I'm going to be honest. I hate to say this. Joe Mixon's almost completely off my board at this point. I can't ignore what we saw last year, guys. You might say, oh, he finishes like top 10 running back. Why can't we draft him again next year? what we saw in the second half was brutal. Weeks 1 through 11, he had 102 attempts, 4.9 yards per carry, 3.32 yards per contact per attempt, 14 missed tackles forced, and 16 runs of 10 or more yards. And he had a breakaway run percentage of 32.8%. The dude was explosive. He was great for this offense. He was a great, efficient running back. And he's getting receiving shots as well. But when you look at week 12 on, after his week 11 performance against Dallas, where he had 3 touchdowns, you saw 60 rush attempts, 3.4 yards per carry, 2.73 yards after contact per attempt, 11 missed tackles forced, and only 6 runs of 10 or more yards, and a breakaway run percentage that dipped by almost 10%. Like, the efficiency severely dropped, and you saw it in his play on the field. He looked slower, he looked weaker, and the offensive line for Houston has only gotten worse. The receiving core is very questionable compared to what we thought about it last year. Like, what is going to happen here? And considering his age, considering that his contract wraps up this year, it just feels like we're entering that zone for Joe Mixon where it's like, yeah, it's coming. That cliff is really coming soon. And we saw at the end of last year, and I think, it's kind of like the stock market where it's like, if you're watching me on YouTube right now, it just slowly starts to dip, and it just crashes. And I think we're seeing that dip for Joe Mixon. We've seen it at the end of the 2024 season, and that crash is coming. I don't want to have Joe Mixon on my roster when that crash hits. So as a result, if you're still drafting him as a high RB2, I'm just out. I'm just not interested in that price. Looking at Tyreek Hill, let's talk about him for a second. Wide receiver 13 off the board. I'm surprised that he's this high. I'm not going to lie. I'm kind of surprised. The fall off seriously began last year. When you look at GPS tracking, it shows that his top speed wasn't nearly as fast as his career average. He dipped significantly. The offense completely changed its mentality as well. They stopped throwing the football downfield and started doing dink and dunk, and it worked. Their offense was kind of productive. It was relatively productive. Tua wasn't throwing interceptions. Tua wasn't getting hit. Tua was staying healthy, and it worked. It just worked for them. But what it didn't work for was Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. They struggled immensely for fantasy. These guys were borderline unstartable when you were playing them in this offense. Like, they were just unstartable most of the season. And Tyreek Hill had injuries as well. He's at 31 years old. And considering 31 years old, the elite speedster that he is, it's easy to see a cliff coming very soon. So wide receiver 13 just sounds too high. If he's going as like a more of a back end wide receiver 2, I'd be fine with taking that risk. But wide receiver 13, man, there's just too many other good wide receivers in this league that I'd rather take. Now we're talking about Zay Flowers, another wide receiver. He's going at wide receiver 27 right now. I don't think that's a horrific price. The problem with Zay Flowers is just that there's no upside. There is very, very, very little upside with Zay Flowers, and I'm going to explain why. Lamar Jackson last year had one of the most efficient passing seasons that we've ever seen from him. One of the highest touchdown percentage, some of the most yardage, some of the most touchdowns overall that we've ever seen out of his career passing wise. Zay Flowers, a year 2 breakout wide receiver, finished as the wide receiver 25 in PPR. Peak Lamar Jackson. He had all the opportunity in the world, Zay Flowers did, to break out. Wide receiver 25. And look, I'm not trying to say Zay Flowers is a bad player. He's a solid wide receiver 1 in this league. However, the offense just doesn't promote fantasy value for him, because even when Lamar Jackson has peak passing, this offense likes to run the football. Mark Andrews exists and Derrick Henry exists. They take away significant touchdowns and significant receiving volume. Rashad Bateman has also gotten better and better in his career as he's gotten healthier. Because of this offense around him, he's not going to be a touchdown guy, and he's not going to be an insane volume guy. So he's just going to continuously be a back-end wide receiver 2. So wide receiver 27 isn't a terrible price. I'm not saying he's going to finish significantly below that. It's just that I don't see him ever getting significantly above that. So as a result, I just think he's a very boring, very mundane pick that's going to get you 6th place in your fantasy league and not give you a shot at first. Sorry. If he was going to wide receiver 30, 35, I would respect Zay Flowers a little bit more at that ADP. But I just don't see it for fantasy with him at wide receiver 25. Or like I just don't see him as a good wide receiver 2 pick. Sorry, I just don't. Now let's look at Colson Loveland. Guys, this one's tough because I talked about Baker Mayfield. I talked about Caleb Williams, how much I love his breakout. Colson Loveland is a great ad. He was a top 10 pick at tight end. However, you consider how much of a crowd there is in this offense for receivers. Caleb Williams can break out and he can have a great season, but you still have Luther Burden, a second-round pick of wide receiver, a very high-value wide receiver. You have DJ Moore, you have Rome Odunze, and you have Cole Kmet in front of Colson Loveland still as a very good veteran tight end. Sometimes for tight ends, it takes a year or two. We've seen it all the time with these great tight end prospects. It just takes a little bit of time. And especially when you have a good veteran tight end in front of them. Like Trey McBride was a high second round pick. He had 1,000 yards in college. He took multiple years to break out because of Zach Ertz. Ben Sennett, a second round pick that we were all excited for, got completely benched for Zach Ertz just this last year. Like, Colson Loveland could definitely sit behind Cole Kmet for a while. And maybe midseason, second half, the breakout's there. But at tight end 12, I just think you're depending on Colson Loveland way too much at that price. If he was going as more like a tight end 16 to 20, I would definitely be more willing to invest, as a tight end 2 sitting on my bench. But you're drafting him in your tight end 1 slot. I just don't think that's worth it because you're going to start off the season likely very, very slow. Last, but certainly not least, or actually kind of least because we're talking about overpays today, Travis Kelce. This is another player where it's just kind of off my board. Travis Kelce really hit that cliff last year. We saw it especially in the Super Bowl, especially in the playoffs, towards the end of the season, at times in the middle of the season. He just didn't look like the same guy. The athleticism, the explosiveness was not there. He looked very clunky. He looked very just not shifty, just not really, he's not juking people out anymore. He's not making those crazy explosive plays. He was just getting dump offs and just falling over. And he only survived in fantasy football last year due to volume alone. And also adding on to this, you have Rashee Rice coming back. That is huge. Rashee Rice dominated those short to intermediate ranges of the field last year, though over the middle throws that where you can get yak. And he forced Travis Kelce to only get 4 targets a game in those first 3 games of the season. Beginning of the season, fresh Travis Kelce, was being completely sidelined because of Rashee Rice. And that's just not a tight end that I want in fantasy. So I'm out. I'm out on Travis Kelce, and I do not think that his price is worth it, even though it's deflated. But that's going to be all for Hutch Coming in Clutch today. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I greatly, greatly appreciate you. Please make sure you follow the show wherever you're listening to your podcast so you be notified every single time a new episode does drop. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky. And don't forget to follow the podcast on Instagram and TikTok. We'll see you all next week. We're going to talk about some undervalued best ball players. See y'all then.